Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. I'm a student at the University of Cambridge, and today I'm going to talk about my research on digital realities, advocacy storytelling, and disruptive spacemaking. Now, I work with a fairly broad definition of digital reality, which is that of an interactive spatial environment that's composed solely or in part of digital elements. And that covers a number of different forms, primarily the four listed here, with each form offering a different experience to users. Nonetheless, a meta-analysis suggests that all these forms share 5 key affordances, albeit in different combinations. And these are juxtaposition, or the layering of content, both digital and real; agency, the ability to take meaningful action in the environment; embodiment, being able to take on the perspective or characteristics of another; immersion, a physically or emotionally enveloping experience; and transcendence, the ability to visit inaccessible or fantastical places. Now, my interest is in understanding how advocates, particularly NGOs and charities, are using these 5 key affordances to tell stories about social issues. Historically, the predominant focus has been on using digital realities for empathy generation, with the intention of creating an emotional connection with a disadvantaged other as the basis for behavioural change. There's also been some experimentation around capacity building in terms of developing habits or skills, often through gamification. However, more recently, different forms are beginning to emerge. So I undertook an artifact analysis of 50 recent digital reality resources created by environmental charities. And I observed this much wider range of narratives in use, which map to a correspondingly greater range of intended advocacy outcomes. And within this, I also noticed a distinct trend concerning the narratives and space making, which then became a key focus for my research, and which I'll go into a bit more detail about. So empathy and consequence narratives, those which have predominated in the past, were primarily about transcending the users to an existing place. So they used contemporary footage, 360-degree immersion, and point of view shots to create embodiment. And this makes sense. It lines up with the lab experiments that show that doing this helps reduce the imagination gap, so it helps better generate empathy. And also embodiment allows for the Proteus effect, discovered by Yi and Baileyson in 2007, whereby individuals might take on the characteristics they associate with their digital avatar, again helping them to create short-term behavioural change. However, new narratives seemed much less focused on creating these emotionally connected spaces and more aiming to disrupt existing spaces. So appreciation narratives, for example, continue to use transcendence, either taking people into real spaces or recreation, such as historical sites. However, by using drone shots or other overhead footage and often interactive click points, which layered commentary into the space, they reduced immersion, but added a greater sense of agency, and also provided a sense of responsibility or guardianship in the space, which is a basis for a more reflective emotional connection, rather than the sort of automated emotional connection created by empathy. And that meant it could both deepen an understanding and also challenge it in the way that this particular example helped challenge the idea of marshlands being an important environmental resource. Narratives that worked around visualization or destabilization were also even more disruptive, but focused on the existing location of the user rather than an additional transcended location. And this was partly because they were more commonly linked to using AR or augmented reality and used fantastical juxtaposition, including a wider range of sensory inputs such as music or haptic vibrations, which work together to deterritorialize an environment. And this allowed the digital reality to create a heterotopic space that, through either rejecting or deliberately disturbing immersion, undermined not just the user's understanding, but the very spatial and temporal logic that underpin their environment. And that allowed them to go as far as questioning the very framing of a social issue. So, for example, the WWF brought forest directly into my living space, not just asking me to reconsider the forest, but also to question my very own culpability and connection to the rainforest in my day-to-day life. Now, my work is at a very preliminary stage, and with such a small sample, I can only suggest possible outcomes of the trends that I've observed. But I'm hoping that with further research, I'll be able to more deeply explore the advocacy possibilities that digital realities offer through disruptive spacemaking. For example, whilst immersive empathy can remove critical framing and lead to inaccurate imaginings, it is possible that more disruptive spaces can offer greater opportunity to address issues of power and conflict. Secondly, they may be able to offer a wider range of outcomes, including more reflective and radical ways of thinking, allowing advocates more choice in how they choose to shape the resources that they create. And finally, they may offer a way for digital realities to go beyond simply re-rendering existing techniques from films and other mediums, but offers something new and particular to their unique combinations of key affordances. A very quick overview there, so please do get in touch if you've got any questions or would like to discuss further. Thank you very much for listening.